welcome everybody to the Sol Speaker Series for August. I'm very excited to introduce our speaker today. Dr. Alex Hastings is a Fitzpatrick Chair of Paleontology at the Science Museum in Minnesota, and he has a deep fondness in his heart for the evolution of crocodiles. Welcome, Dr. Hastings, to the Sol Speaker Series.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. So I'm going to run through just a couple of the fun fossil crocodile projects that I've been a part of. There's so much more out there. So let's dive in and see if we're working here. There we go. Um, so this to me is the absolute pinnacle of evolution. This is the most beautiful, perfect form that has ever been a result of the wonderful process of evolution. So, Crocodilomorpha is the group that includes both all of the living crocodiles and alligators and everything like it, as well as all of their immediate ancestors. So everything that led to the kind that we have around, as well as branches of evolution that died out entirely. So crocodiles are around today, as well as all their ancestors. And man, have they done a lot of wild and wacky things over those millions and millions of years, going back more than 200 million years. Um, just a couple of like rando oddballs out there that have shown up. We've seen things like Armadillosuchus here that has this full body of armor resembling an armadillo. We've seen fully terrestrial, almost like greyhound-like crocodiles, like Rarepasuchus here, things that would have barely spent any time in the water. Same with Caprosuchus here, which is was actually named the boar crocodile because it had these almost tusk-like large teeth. Some have gone fully marine to the point that we're not even sure they would have ever been on land at all. This is Dacosaurus. These are things that would have been way more at home out in the deep ocean, catching big prey out there. There's even Maurosuchus, which is thought to be a filter feeding crocodile, much like a big baleen whale, like sticking its mouth out there, gulping a bunch of stuff, and then pushing the water through their teeth and actually filtering out the food. That's crazy that they're even doing that too. And then some have gone full vegetarian and are actually like would have been exclusive herbivores like Simasuchus here from Madagascar, with like crazy different faces. Some of these, including Simasuchus here, were even burrowing crocodiles. So they've done all kinds of wild and amazing things over their more than 200 million year history here on Earth. And one of the things I really enjoy is diving into when they've done these kind of wacky and different things from what they do today. Um, so a little bit of context for those that might not be as familiar. Um, the reptiles, including all crocodiles and their relatives, are what we call ectothermic or cold-blooded, meaning that they require a certain amount of energy from their environment just to function, and a lot of that comes in the form of temperature. This is why you often see reptiles basking. This is an important part of how their metabolism works, so they can actually get their body running. So they really rely on that, and as a result, that actually makes them a wonderful study group if you're trying to understand the connections between life and climate over time, because they're just so much more tied to those shifts in especially temperature, much more so even than warm-blooded animals like mammals and birds. So I'm going to walk you back to a point in time referred to as the Eocene epoch. It was considerably warmer than today. So you got a temperature curve there in red, and then we're back about 45-ish million years ago. So we are warmer than we are even today with current climate change, although the close the more time goes by, it seems like we're just inching up and up, closer and closer to this time. So this is what we call a greenhouse environment, and that is when we see an amazing amount of reptile diversity. Just to set the scene a little bit, this is what the world would have looked like around that time. So you're seeing there's really no year-round ice caps at this time, and it was so warm that all that extra water ended up creating these sort of tropical or subtropical islands in places like Europe that are not remotely like they're much more temperate today. And that allowed for this crazy amount of reptiles to go into places that they currently aren't. Great example of that is in very, very far northern Canada. Actually found bones of a close relative of alligator up within the Arctic Circle, which is not a place you can see anything like that today, not even close. So it would have been a wild and wacky time. So I had the privilege of getting to live and work in Germany, and specifically with a museum based on a single site that was enormously productive. And this is Geiseltal or the Geisel Valley in kind of centralish Germany. It's the red dot there. And at the time, you got these nice kind of subtropical islands, and the site itself would have been just a few miles from the shore. So it wouldn't have been like a coastal environment, but the ocean wasn't that far away. It would have been pretty hot, pretty swampy, and that's fantastic for reptiles. The fossil preservation there is just absolutely astounding. So it's really everything across the ecosystem. They even found fossil beetles there. And a lot of what they were finding, largely in kind of 1920s to 70s, is when most of the work happened. Um, and they were getting like whole bodies, like routinely getting whole bodies. So like this is a delicate little frog fossil, where you're actually seeing like the eyes on one end, you got the back legs folded up, and just getting absolutely everything together in articulation, which is fantastic. These are actually preserved within layers of brown coal. So a lot of this was built up, the collection was built up while they were excavating coal. Very common fuel source, especially back in the day. Um, and the nice thing is that they were, carefully excavating out these fossils while they were also doing all this economic coal excavation at the same time. Um, Now, one of the more common kinds of animals that have been found there are crocodilians. There's quite a few other kinds of things, including mammals and snakes and all kinds of stuff. But the thing that stands out about the crocodiles is that there are four different types, at least, that would have been living alongside each other. And that's a little bit unusual based on what we've learned from modern ecosystems because typically you get one. Every now and then you get two, and typically when you do even get more than one, you see some key differences between them. So a really good example is right here. So you've got a crocodile on top, you've got a caiman on the bottom there. These are both about a year old or so, maybe two. And you can see even some differences between these because you get like a bit of sort of niche partitioning there where they're going for different things. They're usually pretty different body size as well. So in especially in northern South America, you can find things like the Orinoco crocodile and the spectacled caiman in the same area. Orinoco crocodiles tend to be a heck of a lot bigger and they've got a more narrow snout, eating a little more specialized on fish. And the caiman is a little bit more generalized, but eating smaller prey. And that way they can kind of live in that same environment and not really have to compete too much with food source. So when you start going over two, the question becomes what are they doing in order to sort of not have to compete with each other so much? And does that mean that they're starting to do things that modern crocodilians are not doing because they're pushing into territory that we're not seeing in modern ecosystems. And not to spoil too much, but yes. Um, so my absolute favorite out of all of those there is one that really starts to push that into new territory. So this is Boversuchus magnifrons. It's known from a bunch of individuals, so 50 to 60 from this one individual site, and from a couple of different layers within that site itself. So across the time span that this rock unit preserves fossils from. So it's actually pretty well represented. So this isn't one of those kind of one-off specimens. There's certainly plenty of those out there. There's certainly dinosaurs that are known from a single specimen. This is known from 50 to 60 from one spot, and then it has been found in some other spots in Europe. And actually, there's even a cousin that lives in America as well. And absolutely fascinating animal. One of the things that stands out about it is that it was had serrated teeth. And serrations in the teeth of crocodiles are actually very rare. There are no modern crocodilians that have serrations in their teeth. There's only a handful of fossil ones that do. Um, and it's not like a super big crocodile. We're looking at under 5 feet in length or 1.5 meters thereabouts. So it's not super huge, but for its environment is actually one of the larger things you would find out there. There's not much in the way of like mammals that would have been much bigger than that. So that's actually pretty big for the world that it was living in. Um, so as far as where you do see serrated teeth within modern reptiles, really the standout for that is actually the Komodo dragon. Excuse me. The Komodo dragon, of course, is an awesome terrestrial predator. It hunts mostly on land, and it has these serrations on its teeth on the inside. So you're seeing this kind of special view on a Komodo dragon tooth there. And part of why they seem to need those serrations is the nature in which they feed. So not only are they catching their food on land, but they are typically going for things that are that they're not just swallowing whole. So like a lot of like snakes and stuff have to eat things that they can just get down their mouth. But Komodo dragons go for big stuff, and they need those serrations because they have to carve off chunks of meat. So something like this big water buffalo are pretty common prey for them. So this is where we're already starting to think of Bovarosuchus as being different in having these serrations because it's going for food that it can't just swallow whole. So one, in order to kind of figure out what they might have been eating, we can look at basic skull structure in order to kind of narrow this down. So as far as modern crocodilians go, there are a lot of these adaptations in their skull to make them better adapted at certain kinds of food. So basically having a broader snout means you have a lot more durability, and that means that that strong force can withstand a lot more impact, and that is great for harder foods, so something like a hard turtle shell. Whereas a long, narrow snout is a lot faster, but it is not as strong. So that's good for prey that is quick but not heavily armored. So something like fish. So, what I did is a type of analysis called geometric morphometrics is basically a shape analysis. It basically quantifies that shape by using a series of landmarks, these different spots on crocodile skulls that are consistent no matter what the shape of their skull is. So like the connection between this bone and that bone, and from that, did that across all of the crocodiles that we're getting at this location in Germany, as well as representatives of every living species of crocodile in order to use the modern crocodile's diet to then figure out what the fossil ones would have been based on their shape analysis. What was really interesting into that, oh, and this basically boils like a year's worth of work down into a single slide. gives you a sense of where each of these different crocodiles was doing here. So we've got Asiatosuchus, Bovarosuchus, my favorite here. You've got a sort of average from that quantification of their shape in that average adult skull shape space there. And then the prey preference there is based on what modern crocs of similar skull shape have. Now, with Bovarosuchus, this is where it kind of pushed a bit outside of what we see in modern crocs, but where you got the most overlap is what kind of keying in on what sort of prey is available to them. And it really came into this kind of small to medium sized mammal that was largely based on similarity to the Cuban crocodile. So this is Crocodilus rhombifer. It is lives currently in just two swamps in Cuba. It's highly endangered, and a lot of that has to do with habitat degradation, which is unfortunately common across a lot of different species that are alive today. Anyway, what's really remarkable about the Cuban crocodile, and unfortunately because of geopolitics in Cuba, we don't know as much about the Cuban crocodile as we do of other ones. Um, but from what we do know is that these are one of the most terrestrial of the living crocodiles. It will most routinely find food out on land more so than other types of crocodiles that we have today. And there are even these anecdotes of these being found miles from any water source. And even snapping at trying to jump up for animals that are up in trees, and being found by locals nowhere near water, and still, going out and catching stuff. One of the ways that they're able to do this, even though they don't have those serrated teeth, they do have a much more exaggerated sort of S shape to their jaw. So when you're looking at the Cuban crocodile skull on the left there, you're seeing this kind of S wave sort of here that creates more of a shear force that actually allows for a better kind of way to separate different hunks of meat using their jaws. And we're seeing a bit of that kind of S-shaped curve in Bovarosuchus from Germany. And one of the things that the Cuban crocodiles, one of their preferred prey items, is the Cuban hutia, which is this adorable mammal here, which is a small to medium-sized mammal. And they are decently abundant enough. They provide a good bit of meat, and they're too big to be swallowed whole. So they would use this special jaw feat adaptation in order to take pieces of meat and be able to do that on land. The reason why we don't tend to see, so things like Nile crocodiles and stuff will actually eat things that are bigger than their mouths, but they live in water. And what we're finding in water is the ability to use what's often referred to as the death roll. So where like a Nile crocodile, say it has like a big old wildebeest or something, it'll be floating in the water there, and they can spin their body around after latching onto like a leg or something, and that will pull that apart, and they'll be able to swallow the leg whole. It's a lot harder to do things like a death roll on land. It's not nearly as efficient. So it seems like when you're going to terrestrial feeding, you need a different way to kind of take your prey apart so you can eat it. So we're seeing fun adaptations. So what was Bovarosuchus eating instead? The most, really about the only similar kind of size match to what to the Cuban Hootie is actually Propaleotherium here, which is an early horse. So these are these cute little things. This is early enough into horse evolution, about 45 million years ago, that we don't have anything like the big grassland roaming animals of today. And instead, there were these little forest animals that were living in fairly dense jungle habitats, but they could get to the size of kind of like a German Shepherd. Um, and they are the ancestors to modern horses. So this is a good prey source. This is all based on kind of skulls so far, right? So from kind of skull shape as well as the serrated teeth, we're already kind of thinking of this as kind of maybe a more terrestrial animal. But what about like the whole rest of the body? None of this is like, shouldn't we see some adaptations in the rest of the body? And a lot of times in paleontology, we don't have the rest. We only have, a part of a skull or something to work from. But this is Geiseltal, and there is phenomenal preservation there. So not only do we have some great skulls there, we have an entire body. So this is an amazing, remarkable specimen. This is maybe one of my favorite this is one of my favorite fossils that exists worldwide. This is a nearly complete skeleton. Everything laid out there. So you got it's kind of lying on its side, and then kind of its head's tip up. So like the eyes would be underneath it, and then you got one leg's kind of up here, the other leg's kind of sticking out in the front, and you got those beautiful back legs there, tail. There's even the little stomach stones in the stomach area of this specimen. It's so incredible, so beautiful. If you do the full what we call an osteograph, or showing where all the bones are, the orange is everything that we have, and then the clear is what we don't. So it's almost everything is there. It's fantastic. So we can really look at all the different features in the rest of the body as well, and get a big picture view of this amazing animal. And one of the things that stands out most of all is that the legs are longer than modern crocodiles, that would have allowed it to hold itself off the ground, making it much better at moving on land. Even the pelvis itself is actually would have been shifted a bit, so those legs would have been more directly underneath it. This is, oh, and the tail is actually relatively narrow and thin. This is actually a really big difference from modern crocodiles. So something like this big old gator crossing the road here, they have these big, powerful tails that are full of muscles. Those are fantastic for pushing themselves through the water. They really propel themselves by swishing that tail back and forth, moves that whole body forward. Lots of muscle there, but it's basically useless on land. So it ends up actually becoming kind of more of a commodity, or a risk, or whenever they're moving on land, it becomes more of a burden. But because they're more aquatic in modern stances, that's why it's really worth having that. So they typically don't spend a lot of time on land. They're just really going from one water source to another. But if you're going to spend a lot of time on land, that's a problem. So having that shorter, much thinner tail is actually a much better way of getting around on land. So it had fewer and smaller vertebrae. And what's really fun is the armor plates of the tail are actually, instead of being kind of these big hunky things, are these little spindles. And it actually very likely would have been made it more of like a stiffened rod. So it actually probably would have even been held off the ground as well, which is really, really cool and really, really different. And then the toes, the feet themselves are very different from modern crocodiles as well. So instead of being long and pointy claws, they're actually blunted and round and even flat on the bottom. Just to compare those to modern crocodiles, they have these long, pointy claws across all modern crocodiles and alligators. All of them have these long, pointy claws instead. Um, I did another type of shape analysis as well on these. But just to compare, you've got a more typical crocodilian. This is actually from the same fossil site. Then you got my favorite Bovirasuchus, and just to even compare it to the toe bones of the horse, you're actually seeing a fair bit of similarity in the toe shape of the Bovirasuchus and the horse, because they seem to have been adapted to moving in the same kind of spaces there, which is nuts because one is a reptile and one is a mammal. They're so different. I actually went to 3D shape analysis for this, used a micro CT scanner, and did not only Bovirasuchus, but modern and fossil crocodilians that are more reliably going to be aquatic, and threw in the horse there for comparison. And the gist is aquatic crocodilians kind of showed up in the same sort of what we call morphospace or kind of similarity in shape of their anatomy. Horses came into their own, and the crocodile Bovorasuchus came in between, which is so cool, so cool. So why would they have all this? I think I've basically led up to this. All this seems to be adaptations for doing things like hunting horses on land, which is so amazing and so cool, and not something that we see on this level anywhere in the world today. 45 million years ago, we had our horse hunting crocodiles in Germany, which is so fun. But I wanted to highlight one other big fun project that I was tied into. And in order to do that, we actually need to transport our minds a little further back in time. So let's hop in the DeLorean and go back to the Paleocene epoch, which would have been about 58 to 60 million years ago. We're also going to shift ourselves from Europe to South America. And at the time, it was also quite warm and hot. So we went from the Eocene to the Paleocene. Temperature-wise, we're actually looking not wildly different from what we were before. So still very much a greenhouse environment. And one of the fun things about getting to work at this time and place in Earth's history is that we were some of the first to get to do any of this. This was largely because of a wonderful fossil site that also coincidentally was a big coal mine, the Cerrejón coal mine in northern Colombia, which was a wonderful place to get to be. This was back in the grad student days for me, so this was early into my whole career journey. And we're finding fossil crocodiles from this time relatively soon after the mass extinction of the dinosaurs. So like you've got a spinal column of an extinct crocodile on the left there. Found a skull of a crocodile. This is a much younger me in the bottom right. And this is a massive coal mine. Really an interesting environment where everything's very, very hot. Would have been incredibly hot back then. And one of the common byproducts or things that you often get associated with coal is sulfur. And parts of the coal seam are get hot enough that they spontaneously combust. So there are actually fires just commonly around. It's just part of the whole world there. And so it's got a very strong fire and brimstone vibe to it as you're walking around looking for remains of ancient creatures. And it's a very otherworldly and very cool place to be. My PhD was actually on the fossil crocodiles of this site. So I spent a good bit of time there collecting them and then a lot of time preparing them in the lab. And ended up identifying three new types of crocodile. Actually, all of the crocodiles there were new. And got to name three new types from this spot as my main part of my dissertation. It did share the ecosystem with some other large reptiles. There's one in the bottom left picture there, and the top left of that image that I'll get into in a bit. But then one of the other most common big reptiles there were very, very large turtles. There's another fellow who is a grad student from Columbia, Edwin Cadena, who's shown there in the bottom right picture, who ended up working on that stuff. And there's some fun intersections between the two of us as far as what these things were doing. Now, all three of those were actually a member of one family of extinct type of crocodile known as Dirasauridae. Before this project, everything in the family was more or less this shape, kind of long, narrow, skinny jaws, typically found out in marine or coastal settings. So they're thought to have been these kind of ocean fish catching crocodiles of that time with long, narrow snouts. And there have been about, a dozen and a half of those that have been found worldwide, but all had this kind of long, narrow snout. One of the types of crocodiles that we found at this site did match that. And I should say this would have been a freshwater setting, but again, kind of coastline would have been, like 15 miles or so. So it's not crazy to think that like an ocean going thing might have swum upriver for a ways and started catching fish there too. But the other two really didn't fit in all that well. And this is a reconstruction of that same long-snouted crocodile. This is Acherontosuchus that I got to name. And then there was also a much smaller one that had a much shorter jaw, that even as an adult. And then there was my favorite of the bunch there, because it was the weirdest. There was one that had these really robust, big, thick, heavy jaws, very different from the more dainty, long, narrow snouts that we're seeing in other parts of the world. Now, when we look at this one, which I got to name Anthracasuchus or coal crocodile, you can see, especially like a comparison. So there's a modern alligator skull in the bottom left picture there with one of the skulls of this. We did find four different skulls of this, as well as some of the rest of the body. So we knew this wasn't just a one-off. This is a couple of these representing at least a decent population of these extinct crocodiles. And one of the things that really stands out about it is how much dedicated space there would have been for muscles for the jaw. And these are pretty robust and modern crocodilians. So you're seeing these kind of big spaces. Oh, I highlighted the eyes and the nostril there just to kind of orient you because the skull is kind of squished there. It's a little hard to see. But then these big gaps behind the eyes there are where you get a lot of these muscles for closing the lower jaw. What's really remarkable, now when we look at the teeth of this crocodile, they're actually really blunt and peg-like, and that is actually really a strong adaptation for eating hard foods. You can imagine if you have long, skinny teeth and you eat something hard like a crab, that's gonna, on impact, risk a lot of shattering, right? So you take a long, skinny thing and ram it against a hard object, it's likely to break. So instead, you want blunt peg-like teeth. So this is already suggestive of having kind of a harder type of diet, right? So if we look at the kind of big prey that would have been available that would have been hard, it's those really big turtles. And some of these got really, really big. So this is my counterpart over in turtles, Edwin, with one of his prize finds there. This is a turtle. This is at scale. He was literally laying next to that turtle shell. It was absolutely massive. And one of the really cool things is we found crocodile tooth marks on that very, very big turtle shell. Um, so especially we found some around the edge, which is not too, surprising. It might, maybe like, yeah, we're gonna try and snap at this thing here, kind of nibbling at the edges here or trying to. But no, we actually found a tooth mark smack dab in the middle of this massive turtle. Something that would have had to have happened after it had grown to this a massive size. So we're talking about something that was not only big enough to get its jaws all the way into like the middle of that massive turtle, but doing it with enough force to actually leave a mark in the very solid bone of that shell. So we're talking big and we're talking powerful, which is awesome. One of the things that came about after we actually named this is lower jaw. We actually didn't have any lower jaws before. And what we see is actually additional places for jaw muscles to snap those jaws in the lower jaw in addition to the skull. And we didn't actually know this beforehand. So in the dinosaurs that we knew before, they had these kind of big jaw musculature in the skull. So really housing a lot of the muscles on the top part of the jaw, but comparatively very little on the lower jaw. This crocodile actually had both. The fun thing is that's actually reversed in modern crocodiles where big muscles in lower jaw, not much in the skull. This is the only crocodile that we've really run into where it has very large places for jaw musculature in both the up in the skull itself and the lower jaw. So we're talking about something that would have had an insanely powerful bite. And keep in mind, modern crocodiles actually have the most strongest measured bite force of literally anything in the animal kingdom today. So if we increase that, we're talking about something that had an even stronger bite than anything alive today, including within crocodiles, but even more than like great white sharks, which is nuts, right? So this is how I came around to coming up with the species name of this animal. So this was so Anthracosuchus coal crocodile. That's the genus name. Also needed a new species name. I'm absolutely a nerd. I think I'm in a good group here for that sort of thing. So this was a beast that was incredibly powerful. You find lots of, it was found deep within a mine. And it was a beast of flame and power, so that is why I chose to name it after Tolkien's Balrog. For those of you that might not be familiar in the story, The Fellowship of the Ring, the group ended up in the mines of Moria and encountered one of these massive, powerful beasts deep within a mine that got uncovered because the dwarves that were mining there got a little too deep and uncovered this incredibly ancient and powerful creature. And that to me is evoking what we were finding in this fossil crocodile. So I was very happy that not only did the reviewers go for it, I was actually nervous my PhD advisor would not go for it. But not only did he said it was fine, he actually moved it to the title of the publication. And I think it was thanks to that a little bit that managed to make it onto like the Tolkien fan sites, which was very gratifying for me, and getting the word out there as well about this really cool ancient creature. I was very happy this a fellow actually put together this big art piece about like all these ancient creatures named after different things, and he actually made the Balrog crocodile as this wonderful reconstruction of it fighting Gandalf and with the big fire whip and everything, which is absolutely 10 out of 10. Love it, love it, love it. Um, and just because I'd be remiss not to mention the other giant reptile from the same place here, I'll bring this together on another very large reptile from the same place as the Balrog crocodile. But to do that, I'm going to give you a little bit of context on snakes. So this is a modern anaconda vertebra. So this is one of the largest snakes that we have alive today. Anacondas are the biggest on mass, on body size. They can get to be a couple 100 pounds, which is bigger than any other type of snake on weight. And I'm going to show you a fossil snake that was found in the same place as the Balrog, which is just a smidge bigger. So those are completely to scale. This is actually not even the largest vertebra of the ancient snake that we found in the same place. This we ended up getting to name. We actually found about 50 individuals of them, and that is what we decided to name Titanoboa, the largest snake of all time ever known. It actually clears both size and weight for all other snakes. We're talking about 40 feet, 42, 43 feet in length, and weighing 1.25 tons, making it the longest and heaviest snake on record anywhere in all of time, which is super awesome. And was a fantastic thing to be involved in, especially as a grad student. So we got to name Titanoboa cerhoensis, or Titanic's boa, from the Cerrejón coal mine. Absolutely amazing, and I was happy that my Balrog crocodile got into the reconstructions of that as well. So you got Titanoboa, the big snake there, and then the Balrog crocodile is the one that's kind of lumbering behind it there. And such a fascinating and amazing ecosystem to get to study, of which the crocodiles, I think, were an incredibly important part of that ecosystem. Um, so with that, I want to encourage anyone that ever gets to be around the Twin Cities here in Minnesota. It's a wonderful place to be and visit. So if you're ever around town, I encourage you to come to the Science Museum in Minnesota. And you can see the only place, at least within America, where you can find a reconstruction of Titanoboa is actually at my museum and is actively eating a crocodile as well. So it is on exhibit. We hope to come and see you. And if you do, look me up because I'll show you around. With that, I will. Oh, and if you thank a few sources here, always happy to get funding to actually get to do this kind of thing, including from Germany and from a variety of sources in order to do all these kinds of cool things. And if you want to know what I'm up to at any given point, I'm pretty active on social media. So here's a variety of ways in which you can see the different kinds of goofy things that I tend to do. So with that, I will stop and I will say thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much. Oh my gosh, that was fascinating. And I'm glad I live in today's era.
I would have so it would have been incredibly dangerous, but I honestly wish I could have seen any number of these when they were alive. It's so cool.
I bet you would. We're gonna open it up for
Sure.
questions. And if anyone has a question, please raise your hand and we can see if Dr. Hastings can satisfy your curiosity. I know we have a few questions in the chat.
See one hand up. Yeah, go ahead, Janet.
Okay, I really enjoy your passion. This has been a very entertaining event. I would like to know what inspired you to pursue this field specifically.
So as far as paleontology goes, like this is the only thing I've ever wanted to do. I was very much that 3-year-old, totally geeked out on dinosaurs, and the only thing that changed as I got older. I've had that same passion as long as I can remember, and apparently I knew paleontology was like a career option early enough that I literally have no memory of wanting of like deciding because it's just been like ingrained in me since memory formed. So this has been a lifelong passion by far. And as far as why crocodiles specifically, they're the most beautiful creatures that exist. I don't know how to explain other than I don't know why everybody doesn't try and do this for a living. I think they're endlessly fascinating, and I've been studying them for now most of my life, and I'm still learning new things all the time. And I hope I get to do this for another 50 years. I don't know how long I'll make it, but I will never get tired of these, I promise.
Thank you.
And could I get you to stop sharing your screen and
Oh,
that
yes,
would help me
absolutely.
be able to see everybody on the,
There we go.
there we go. Any other questions? Pam?
Yeah, I put this in the chat, but I'll repeat it now. So the narrow-nosed crocodiles, crocodilians, how strong is their bite compared to the ones with the wider noses?
Right. So the whiters actually do have more force that they can bring to it. So like if you like the Indian gharial has this like really long narrow snout, it does not have the same level of bite force as like a saltwater crocodile. Saltwater crocodiles are the strongest, but it does also scale to size. So the bigger the crocodile is, generally it's going to have a stronger bite. So the strongest bite force that you're going to find is going to be the biggest saltwater crocodile out there. But yes, it does translate to more force. So what we're seeing in the Balrog crocodile is, but a pretty good body size. You're looking at a kind of comparable to the biggest of the crocs that we have alive today, but also with a very wide skull, which would have been able to kind of withstand that very strong force.
Thank you.
I had a question for you, Dr. Hastings, on um, what is the technique used to reassemble a fossilized skeleton that is in so many tiny pieces? Like, I cannot even comprehend. how someone can do that and how long it must take to reconstruct.
Yeah, it's a lot of so we do use like modern bone collections quite a lot to help us identify things as well as kind of figure out where things are attaching because a lot of times even if it's kind of together, it's jumbled or you're off and you're always missing something. But there's a lot of consistencies that you'll find across evolution where, especially tetrapods or anything four-limbed, has a reliable sort of connect. Like there's a shoulder blade and there's a humerus and there's a radius.
Mhm.
So we can use a lot of those to kind of guide us on how these things would all go together. And occasionally we do get specimens like the Bovrisuchus from Germany, where everything's laid out as it was when it was alive, and those are amazing because you don't have to interpret; they're preserved as they would have been when they were alive, and that's
Mhm.
really helps also guide into the rest of the fossil record where we're seeing like maybe even some from that same fossil site where we just have a couple of bones. We can be very confident then on not only what they belong to, but where they would have gone in the body. And every now and then you'll get an extinct creature that's so wildly different that it takes us a while to really kind of figure out what's going on with it. Um, but there's a lot that we can draw from modern animals in order to learn about the past ones.
Thank you. Valerie.
Yeah, and so it was very, very interesting. How would you imagine their skin? Because there's nothing left of their skin compared to how the crocodiles are today.
Right, so crocodiles are awesome because they actually have bones in their skin. So those armor plates are something we even see in modern crocodiles and alligators. So that is why you kind of see that sort of bumpy texture on the back of crocodilians, because we do find those as fossils, because they're all also bones. So that actually really helps us understand how at least a lot of the skin would have looked and then the rest of it is a fair bit of interpretation based on modern ones. So would they have had on parts where those armor plates aren't covering them, would that have looked very different? Maybe, maybe not. This ends up being a lot more of an issue for things that are pretty different from modern stuff, and like dinosaurs are a great example of that, where we're doing a fair bit of interpretation because the skin very rarely fossilized. Sometimes we get impressions. Sometimes very rare occasion, we'll get actual fossil skin. Um, so that's where we end up relying on modern things, and that's why you'll see a lot of similarity to like iguana skin or something because we're looking to parallels wherever we can draw them. But at least as far as a large part of like especially the back and tail, they would have actually we can be pretty confident about what that skin would have looked like.
Yeah, thank you.
So I have a question about modern day alligators.
Yeah,
I was at the Okefenokee Swamp quite
darn it.
some time ago on a canoe trip, and there was a adult alligator that had killed a younger alligator and was
Mm.
carrying it around in its jaws for days and days. I also found a beaver carcass floating in a channel that clearly had been chomped on by an alligator. And the person who was the concessioner for the canoes said that they often let their food decompose a bit before they eat it. Is that an accurate statement?
Yeah, so there are a bunch of crocodilians that will create a cache, so basically store their food for later, and it can sort of vary depending on how hungry they are, whether or not, like a lot of times they will just go ahead and eat it. They don't necessarily wait, but especially if like they've eaten recently, but there's a good opportunity, they'll go ahead and snatch something and then save it for later. So it's not necessarily that they like have to wait for it to decompose. It's more that
Mhm.
they can wait sometimes, and yeah, they'll create a little area that they, you know, will store some food for later. Yeah.
He told me it was probably not a good idea that I spent quite a bit of time trying to cut the tail off of the beaver.
Oh, might have come back for it. Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, any other questions? Well, I have one last question for you. I noticed your Star Trek shirt. I know you're a Star Trek fan. I thought since we're celebrating 60 years of Star Trek next year, I would ask you, did Star Trek influence your choice to become a scientist, or how did it? I know you're a big fan, so how did Star Trek influence you?
So I think in the sense of like helping instill a passion for science just generally. So like it's something I've always really been drawn to, but I think properties like Star Trek just help kind of keep all of that sort of top of mind in a very entertaining and engaging kind of way. So it makes you, uh, it helps you just kind of stay excited about science as just an avenue of life and how it can help in problem solving and and getting to better understand the not just the natural world, the natural universe. And I love Star Trek. I love Star Wars. Like things that are in this science fiction realm are just fantastic for holding that attention. And I think they're also really great in bringing other people on board to science as a good thing to help instill a love of science in more people. And for me, Star Trek was sort of an exploration of science in a lot of different ways, and not that it necessarily tied directly into love of dinosaurs very much, but certainly into that love of science.
I want to thank you very much, Dr. Hastings, for spending the morning with us and sharing your expertise. That talk was fascinating. I never thought about crocodiles or them in the fossil record, and I'm actually looking forward to learning more about it. So, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Our next Cell Speaker event will be coming up in September, and it's going to feature Diane, who's down there on the bottom row of my screen, is our Chief of Education. She's going to be doing a talk on her experience flying aboard NASA's Stratospheric Observatory for Infrared Astronomy, otherwise known as SOFIA. That's on September 20th, which is a Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. So thanks, everyone. Have a beautiful rest of your day, and we'll look forward to seeing you at the next Cell Speaker event in September with Rip.
Awesome. Enjoyed it.
Thank you. Have a good weekend.
Live long and prosper.
Have a good weekend.